If one day, you encounter a lone woman standing amid a desolate field, the wind blowing coldly, her gaze deep yet still flickering with a faint flame of hope. If you see a single father, his hands rough and calloused, leading his young child to a dilapidated farm, holding on to the fragile belief that this place could be a new beginning. And if you witness them, amidst storms and threats, amidst schemes of takeovers and the crushing pressure of power, still standing steadfastly, not for themselves, but for a land they call home, then this is a story you cannot miss. Prepare yourself, because today's story will take you through the challenging journey of a brave woman, a resilient single father, and a small community stronger than any storm. A story about love for the land of their ancestors, about life rekindled from the ashes, and about a Harper homestead that never surrenders. Don't take your eyes away. The story begins now. The gentle sunlight of early morning streamed through the dusty window, casting a honeyed glow on Ethan Morgan's weary face. The man slowly turned off the engine of his old pickup truck, its rumbling sound as familiar as the endless journeys it had endured. Before him stretched the Silver Pine Valley, a land marked on the map with just a simple name, but to Ethan, it was the last fragile thread of hope he could cling to. On the passenger seat, his 7-year-old son, Lucas, gazed wide-eyed out the fogged-up window at the ancient pine trees that stood like silent guardians of this new land. The boy eagerly pressed himself closer, his small hands cupping the misty glass. "Dad," Lucas chirped, his voice full of childlike curiosity and hope. "Do you think there's treasure here?" Ethan smiled faintly, a bittersweet warmth flickering in his eyes like a small flame in the long winter night. He gazed toward the distant fields of golden barley, where the first rays of dawn seemed to gild the earth. "There is, son," he replied softly yet full of conviction, as though reminding himself too. "But not the kind of treasure you're thinking of." Lucas giggled, his eyes sparkling like the last morning star in the clearing sky. He didn't need to know what kind of treasure it was, for Lucas. Anywhere with his father was already a land of adventure. Silver Pine Valley unfolded before them like a vivid oil painting. Green hills embraced golden barley fields, undulating like waves across a vast land sea. In the distance, slate-blue mountains lay like sleeping giants, sheltering the valley from the storms beyond. But deep in Ethan's heart, he knew, every land carried its own story, and Silver Pine was no exception. He had heard tales of broken dreams, of farmers abandoning their dry fields, unable to withstand the cruelty of time and fate. Yet, there was something different about this place, a steady calm, like the breath of Mother Earth, waiting for caring hands to bring it back to life. "Are we going to stay here, Dad?" Lucas asked, his eyes filled with both anticipation and worry. Ethan grasped his son's hand, his rough fingers wrapping tightly around the boy's small, tender palm like a young sprout pushing bravely through the soil. "Yes, we're going to try," he answered, speaking not only to his son but also to himself. "Maybe, just maybe, this place will be our home." The wind from the distant mountains drifted by, carrying the scent of wild grasses and damp earth, like a quiet welcome from Silver Pine to these weary travelers. Ethan stepped out of the truck, his deep oak brown eyes sweeping over the new land, memorizing every detail. The low wooden house at the end of the rocky dirt road was their temporary shelter. Not spacious, not modern, but it had a roof, a bed for Lucas and him, and most importantly, it held a chance for them to rebuild the life that had once been torn away by storms. While Ethan hauled their belongings from the truck, Lucas ran toward the rustic wooden fence, pointing excitedly into the distance. "Dad, that place looks like a collapsed barn." Ethan followed his son's gaze, and sure enough, not far away stood a large, old barn with rusty tin roofing and leaning wooden walls that looked ready to give way at any moment. He nodded thoughtfully, as if fate was already setting the stage for a special beginning. "Dad will help the farm owner fix it," Ethan replied, a glimmer of trust in his new job shining in his eyes. Little did he know that from that seemingly ruined place, not only would the barn be reborn, but so too would the lives of both him and Lucas, turning to a new and unexpected chapter. The sun had now risen above the mountain peaks, its rays piercing through the dense pine canopy, casting shimmering streaks of light along the winding dirt road like a golden carpet welcoming new arrivals. Ethan Morgan's old pickup truck shuddered gently over the bumpy gravel path. Dust billowed behind, leaving behind the only trace of these wanderers in search of a new home. Lucas, sitting on the passenger seat, pressed his round face to the window, his bright blue eyes sparkling like an autumn lake. "Dad," the boy exclaimed, excitement and a bit of nervousness in his voice. "Where is Harper Homestead?" Ethan squinted ahead, where the thinning trees revealed a vast open space stretching to the horizon. "Right there, son," he answered, his deep voice as warm as the wind blowing through the harvest fields. "The White House, do you see it?" Lucas nodded eagerly, his eyes lighting up, amidst the wide, almost untouched expanse of Silverpine Valley. Harper Homestead stood like a steadfast anchor amidst the wild prairie. A 2-story wooden house painted white, its aged roof weathered by time, and its broad porch adorned with wildflowers basking in the morning sun. And not far away, the agricultural equipment shed resembled a weathered old soldier, rusted tin roof, mottled wooden walls, cracks running like unhealed scars. But there was something else that immediately caught Ethan's attention. A woman stood firmly in front of the shed, her tall, slender figure clad in practical yet decisive work clothes, a plaid shirt, dark jeans, and dust-streaked leather boots. The sunlight brushed her chestnut hair, tied neatly at the nape of her neck, casting a warm halo around her. Isabella Harper. At that moment, Ethan knew she was not an ordinary woman from the countryside tales he had heard. There was something in Isabella's gaze, profound and resolute, shining with an extraordinary strength, as if she bore not only this farm on her shoulders but also the legacy of generations past. Ethan stopped the truck and stepped out, immediately sensing the stillness of this place, where every sound seemed to yield to unspoken truths. "You're Ethan Morgan?" Isabella's voice rang out, not loud but clear and firm, like a hammer striking an anvil in a forge. Ethan nodded, extending his rough hand toward her, the hand of a skilled worker. "Yes, and you must be Isabella Harper." She shook his hand, firmer than he expected. It wasn't a polite handshake, but the grip of someone well acquainted with hard labor, someone saving her livelihood with her own hands. "You arrived earlier than I anticipated," Isabella said, her eyes flicking toward the collapsing shed. "That barn won't last through the winter. I needed to survive." Ethan followed her gaze, his brows furrowing slightly. "In this condition," he admitted honestly, "we'll have to do more than just patch it up." Isabella pressed her lips together, her eyes steely yet hiding a worry she tried to conceal. "We?" she emphasized, as if testing him. Ethan didn't hesitate. "We," he affirmed, then added, "I'm not used to working alone in places like this." At that moment, Lucas had already opened the truck door and dashed forward, unable to contain his childlike excitement. Suddenly, the boy stopped in his tracks, his eyes lighting up as he spotted a small creature curled under the porch steps. "A dog, Dad," Lucas exclaimed, bending down carefully, extending his hand toward the scruffy little dog, its fur matted and dusty. Isabella stepped over, crouching beside the dog. "That's Scout," she introduced, her voice softer than before. "He showed up one day, skin and bones, shivering. I suppose he was looking for a home. Just like us." Lucas looked up at Ethan, his eyes bright with innocent hope. "Dad, can we keep Scout?" Ethan hesitated briefly, but when he saw his son's pleading eyes, the eyes he had grown so used to over the years, always searching for safety in their endless journeys, he couldn't bring himself to say no. "We'll keep him," Ethan said softly, a rare smile playing at the corner of his lips. Isabella stood up, squinting under the sunlight, looking at Ethan and Lucas as if, for the first time, she saw a glimmer of light piercing her stormy sky. "Perhaps Scout chose the right family to stay with," she murmured. The air around them seemed to warm a little, no longer just two strangers, but three souls battered by life's storms, now finding a spark of warmth and a sliver of hope for a new tomorrow. Ethan gazed at the old shed, nodding slightly, his hand tightening around the hammer at his belt. "Then let's begin." Isabella nodded, needing no further words, and as they stepped across the weathered threshold of the old shed, with Lucas and Scout following close behind, something, quiet yet powerful, began to take root within each of them. A beginning no one had foreseen, but one they were all silently hoping for. Sunlight slanted through the gaps in the barn roof, flickering down onto the weathered planks. Washed pale with time, the sound of a hammer striking a nail echoed through the still air, like the steady heartbeat of life returning to a place long forgotten. Ethan Morgan worked with deep concentration, each firm strike of his hammer carrying all the hope he held within. The old, warped wooden beams, bent under years of wind and rain, were gradually being replaced with new planks, not perfect, but strong, just like his own life, every crack, every fracture, slowly mended by his own hands. Isabella stood nearby, holding a board in place as he nailed it down. The sunlight spilled across her face, highlighting her determined features, but also the quiet softness beneath, a strange blend of storms and gentle resilience. Lucas, wearing an oversized cap, was busy gathering stray nails scattered beneath Ethan's feet. Scout followed him around, tail wagging enthusiastically, as if eager to play his part in the revival of Harper Homestead. "Have you ever worked on a farm before?" Isabella suddenly asked, her warm voice cutting through the clang of hammering. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, eyes never leaving the spot where he drove the nail. "Not much," he admitted, "but I've spent plenty of time with rotten wood and rusted iron." Isabella let out a soft laugh, not loud but refreshing like a gentle breeze. "Then you're well suited for this place," she said, glancing around with a tinge of melancholy. "This farm is full of rotten wood and rusted iron, too." Her words, though spoken in jest, felt like a quiet confession of sorrow. Ethan looked up at her, catching a glimpse of exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that comes from carrying burdens alone for far too long. "This farm, is it your whole life?" Ethan asked softly, his voice low out of respect for the sacredness of what had just been revealed. Isabella didn't answer immediately. She stood up straight, dusting her hands free of sawdust, and turned her gaze toward the rolling barley fields beyond, where the breeze played over the crops like waves across a golden sea. "More than my life," she murmured, almost to herself. "This place is all that remains of my parents. My father once dreamed of turning Harper Homestead into the sustainable agricultural heart of the entire Silverpine region." Her voice dipped, her eyes distant as though reliving old memories. "But when he passed, that dream fractured too. One by one, our partners walked away. The investors who once praised my father turned their backs." Hearing this, Ethan felt a deep heaviness in his chest. Her loneliness mirrored his own, like an echo of the life he had lived. He knew that feeling too well, the feeling of standing amid a collapsing world with no one left beside you. Lucas, still preoccupied with Scout, suddenly piped up in his clear childlike voice, "Miss Isabella, I think my dad once had a dream, too, just like your dad." Isabella bent down slightly, her eyes softening as she looked at the boy, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Lucas, what was your father's dream?" Lucas thought for a moment, then answered innocently, "Dad once told me, as long as you have a place to call home, that's the best dream of all." Ethan paused briefly, his heart tightened at his son's simple truth. Indeed, beyond all the grand ambitions out there, the only thing he had ever truly sought was a place they could call family. Isabella turned to look at Ethan, their eyes meeting in a silent understanding. In that moment, two wounded souls seemed to recognize each other more deeply than ever before. "Then maybe," Isabella said slowly, "we're rebuilding that dream together." Ethan nodded, gripping his hammer tightly, as if every nail he drove was fastening the broken pieces of their lives back together. Overhead, a gentle breeze stirred, lifting flecks of sunlight and dust, kindling a warm glow within the rotting walls. Harper Homestead, though still scarred, began to beat with life once more, thanks to the hands of those who carried within them resilience and the desire to start anew. The day passed in seemingly peaceful progress at Harper Homestead. The morning sky, once clear and blue, poured golden light over the honey-hued fields, and sparrows chirped merrily on weathered fences. The sound of Ethan's hammer echoed steadily, blending with the clatter of wood, creating a rhythm that felt like the heartbeat of the old farm slowly coming back to life. Isabella Harper stood nearby, steadying the beams, her hands stronger than one might expect, her eyes sharp and unwavering, as if she was willing life back into the place with her very gaze. Lucas and Scout played near the fence, the boy's laughter ringing in the air, his cheeks rosy under the afternoon sun. His joy seemed to infuse Harper Homestead with warmth, making even its still decaying corners feel alive once again. But then, something strange happened. The wind began to shift. At first, it was a gentle breeze brushing across the barley fields. But soon, stronger gusts rolled in, turning the familiar rustling into an ominous whisper. Isabella looked up from her work, her brows furrowing. "Ethan," she called out, her voice now lower, more cautious. "Do you feel it? The wind has changed." Ethan straightened, narrowing his eyes toward the western horizon. Dark clouds churned like wild beasts, devouring the sunlit sky that had been bright moments before. "This isn't good," he murmured, his gaze sharpening with experience. "The storm is coming faster than I expected." Isabella said nothing more, but the concern in her eyes was unmistakable. They didn't need to speak it aloud. Both knew. For a farm not yet fully secured like Harper Homestead, a violent storm could be a death blow. "Lucas," Ethan called sharply. The boy looked up immediately. "Get inside the house, and take Scout with you." Lucas obeyed without hesitation, scooping Scout into his small arms and running for shelter. Worry clouded his innocent face. "We need to reinforce the barn now," Ethan said urgently, turning to Isabella. "If the gale hits, the roof will be the first to go." Isabella nodded without hesitation. "I'll grab the ropes and tarp from the tool shed." The two of them moved in perfect unison, as if they had worked side by side their entire lives. They tightened beams, fastened the windproof tarp, and nailed wooden shutters firmly over the windows. Sweat streaked down Isabella's cheeks, but she uttered no complaint. Ethan worked tirelessly too, each swing of his hammer defying the ferocity of the approaching storm. The wind howled through the trees, swirling leaves into miniature cyclones and kicking up clouds of dust. Just as they finished securing the roof, a snapped branch slammed against it with a harsh crack. "Inside, now," Ethan shouted, grabbing Isabella's hand and pulling her toward the main house. They slammed the door shut just as a furious gust battered against it, making it shudder on its hinges. Lucas clung tightly to Scout, his wide eyes peering out through the small window, watching the wind whip dirt and debris into a frenzy. In that chaotic moment, amidst the howling wind and pounding rain, Isabella looked at Ethan. Their eyes met, and without words, she understood. He wasn't here just to fix broken beams. He was here to weather the storm with her. Isabella's heart, long hardened by cold, lonely winters, suddenly tightened with an unfamiliar feeling, a flicker of trust, of rare comfort amid the tempest. "Perhaps," she whispered, as if to herself, "not everything is swept away by the storm." Ethan, still holding the door fast against the gale, looked at her. He didn't speak, but his gaze carried a message clearer than words. "As long as I'm here, Harper Homestead will not fall." The storm raged on deep into the night. Only when the winds began to ease and the rain softened to a gentle patter on the roof did they dare to breathe a sigh of relief. Isabella opened the door to the porch, letting the cool night air wash over her face. Though parts of the fence had been toppled and broken branches littered the yard, miraculously, the barn still stood. Ethan stepped beside her, his shoulders damp with rain, holding a lantern tightly in his hand. "We kept it standing," he said, his deep voice laced with unmistakable relief. Isabella didn't respond immediately. She gazed at the weathered barn, and for the first time in many long months, a quiet sense of wonder stirred in her chest. Hope. And standing beside her, this man, this single father who had arrived from far away, had done more than repair a barn. He had pieced back together the fragments of her trust, even amid life's fiercest storms. The next morning, the sky over Silverpine Valley felt freshly cleansed by the previous night's storm. The air was crisp and cool, droplets of water glistening on every leaf, and the damp earth released a raw, invigorating scent as if the land itself had been quenched. Ethan Morgan leaned against the fence he had hastily reinforced at dawn. He drew a deep breath, letting the scent of the prairie fill his lungs, feeling life slowly returning to this place. Isabella Harper stepped onto the porch, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The gentle sunlight poured down onto her hair, highlighting strands of soft, golden brown like silk ribbons spun from morning light. She handed a cup to Ethan, her smile weary but filled with heartfelt gratitude. "You saved my farm last night," she said, her voice as soft as the morning breeze. Ethan accepted the cup, his fingers brushing hers in an accidental but electric touch that seemed to make the air still for a heartbeat. "We saved it together," he replied, his gaze steady. No one should have to face a storm alone. But the calm after the storm lasted only a moment. The rumble of an engine shattered the morning's peace, making them both turn their heads at once. A sleek, polished car, a jarring contrast to the rustic surroundings, slowly rolled down the muddy path toward Harper Homestead. The black sedan splashed through leftover puddles from the storm, advancing with cold, deliberate intent. When it stopped, the door opened, and a man stepped out. Victor Langston. Ethan recognized him instantly, even though they had never met. The man wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, a deep red tie, an elegant but chilling emblem of power. Every step he took across the soil of Harper Homestead seemed heavy, as if he intended to stamp his claim onto the land. Isabella gripped her coffee cup tightly, her eyes hardening into steel. His arrival was no coincidence. Victor's gaze swept over the scene, the newly reinforced barn, the patched-up fence, the child playing with a small dog in the distance. And finally, it settled on Isabella. "Isabella Harper," he began smoothly, his voice sweet as honey yet cold as ice. "We meet again." Isabella didn't flinch. She stood tall, her head held high like a commander facing down an invading force. "Victor Langston," she replied firmly, "I didn't expect you here today." Victor's mouth curled into a smile that never touched his eyes. "I wanted to personally inspect this golden piece of land before it becomes mine," he said, deliberately emphasizing the final words. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Isabella and Victor, his gaze sharp as a newly forged blade. "You're mistaken," Ethan said, his voice low yet resonating like thunder across the valley. "This land is not for sale." Victor looked him over with thinly veiled contempt, his eyes flicking over Ethan's worn work clothes and calloused hands. "The new handyman, I presume?" Victor sneered. "Pity. Your efforts will be washed away with the first waves of development when this place becomes a resort." Isabella stepped up beside Ethan, her eyes ablaze like molten steel. "There will be no resort," she declared, her words falling like hammer blows. "You have no claim here, Langston." Victor let out a short, empty laugh, a hollow sound echoing in the quiet air. "We both know how this game is played, Isabella," he said, his tone sharp and cold. "Rules aren't made for dreamers like you." His eyes darted briefly toward Lucas, who clung to Scout at a distance, then returned to Isabella, filled with veiled menace. "For the sake of those you care about," Victor added darkly, "you'd be wise to reconsider." With those parting words, he turned and strode back to his car. The sedan roared away, splattering muddy tracks along the narrow path, as if Victor had deliberately left his mark. Isabella's knuckles turned white as she gripped her cup tightly. Ethan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, his gaze fixed on the retreating vehicle. "Don't let him shake you," Ethan said, his voice like a pillar of strength amid the brewing storm. Isabella drew a deep breath, steadying her shoulders. "No," she replied softly but with unwavering determination. "I will not let him take this place. Not now, not ever." Amidst the muddy remnants of yesterday's storm and the fresh threat of a new enemy, they stood side by side, not as employer and worker, but as comrades ready to face whatever lay ahead. And deep beneath their feet, Harper Homestead seemed to stir with life, as if the land itself had heard their unspoken vow. Sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the old barn and glinting off the new nails, a silent witness to their shared promise. This place will not fall into the wrong hands. The sun began its descent toward the horizon over Silverpine Valley, casting long golden rays across the vast prairie. Despite the storm and the tense encounter with Victor Langston, Harper Homestead still felt heavy with tension, as if a storm still lingered in the air. Isabella Harper sat on the porch steps, her eyes following the gentle sway of barley in the breeze. Scout rested his head on her lap, occasionally twitching his nose, sensing his mistress's unease. Nearby, Lucas scratched shapes into the dirt with a twig. A house. A field, and 3 figures standing side by side. Himself, his father, and Isabella. The innocent drawing struck a deep chord in Isabella's heart, as though the boy had captured a secret dream she had tried to bury. The hum of an approaching engine pulled her from her thoughts. An old, dust-streaked pickup truck turned down the farm's path. Ethan, still working on the outer fence, looked up at the sound. Walter Greaves. The man stepped out of his truck with a slow, deliberate stride, his broad shoulders and deeply lined face telling of a lifetime spent wrestling with the land. His work-worn clothes and faded hat spoke of his enduring bond with Silverpine soil. Ethan set down his hammer and hurried over. Isabella rose too, her expression mixed with surprise and wary resolve. "Walter," Isabella greeted, bowing her head slightly in respect. "I didn't expect to see you today." Walter nodded at them both, his eyes heavy with storm clouds that had yet to burst. "Word travels fast in Silverpine, Isabella," he said, his voice low and grave like distant thunder. "I heard Victor Langston paid you a visit." Isabella clenched her fists, her eyes cold and hard as frozen lakes in winter. "He didn't just visit," she replied. "He threatened us openly, but I told him, Harper Homestead is not for sale." Walter sighed deeply, his gaze dropping to the ground as though weighed by unspeakable burdens. "Isabella, I know you're strong," he began heavily, "but you need to understand, Langston isn't just bluffing. He's lobbying the county council, persuading them to invoke eminent domain." Isabella's heart constricted. Even Ethan, braced for bad news, felt a hollow thud in his chest. "Eminent domain?" Ethan repeated, needing to be certain. Walter nodded slowly. "If Langston convinces them that Harper Homestead is abandoned or unproductive, the council could seize it and sell it to investors." Isabella bit her lip until it turned white. She had feared this, but hearing it confirmed by Walter, one of Silverpine's most respected elders, felt like a blade to the heart. "How long do we have?" Isabella asked, her voice tight but still burning with defiance. Walter met her eyes squarely. "Not long," he admitted. "A few weeks at most." Ethan's fists clenched, his knuckles turning pale. He couldn't stand by and watch the place that had become a home for him and Lucas be stolen away by the greed of men like Langston. "Is there a way to stop him?" Ethan asked, his voice sharp as a drawn blade. "A way to prove Harper Homestead is alive, not dead as he claims?" Walter narrowed his eyes, seeing the fire in the younger man's gaze. Slowly, he nodded. "There is," Walter said, "if you can hold a community event that draws enough attention. Prove this place is a living, breathing heart of Silverpine. The council won't approve the seizure." Isabella and Ethan exchanged a glance, their eyes sparking like flint striking steel. "A farmer's market," Isabella said aloud. "We'll hold it right here at Harper Homestead." Walter's lips curled into a rare, approving smile. "That's the Isabella Harper I remember," he said, pride gleaming in his eyes. Ethan didn't hesitate. "We won't just hold a market. We'll turn it into a festival for the entire town. We'll remind everyone why this place is worth fighting for." Isabella nodded, a new light igniting in her eyes, as though the parched earth of her spirit had finally felt the rain. "Then we start today," she declared firmly. "No more waiting." Walter laid a steady hand on Isabella's shoulder, grounding her with the wisdom of a man who had endured many harsh seasons. "I'll help you," he vowed, "and you'll see, Silverpine still has many who will stand with you." The evening breeze swept across the barley fields, rustling the golden stalks as if Harper Homestead itself was breathing a sigh of relief. For the first time, the battle was no longer Isabella's alone. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, a silent promise of a new dawn to come. The sun rose higher than usual, its golden rays pouring down onto Harper Homestead like a blessing after days of gloom. The sunlight no longer felt like an indifferent natural light but rather a quiet benediction for the revival gradually seeping into every fiber of the land. Isabella Harper stood on the porch, her gaze sweeping over the wide, open space in front of the old barn. Today, the place that had once been covered in dust and weeds would become the main stage for the first counterattack against Victor Langston. All of Silverpine Valley would bear witness. Ethan stepped up beside her, his clothes stained with soil, but his eyes burning bright like fire. Lucas skipped along behind, arms full of wildflowers he had just picked from the field's edge. eager to add his part to the decorations for this important day at Harper Homestead. "We're ready," Ethan said, his voice low and steady like the beat of a ceremonial drum. Isabella nodded slightly, inhaling deeply to take in the air rich with the scent of young grass, damp earth, and an unmistakable undercurrent of anticipation fluttering in her chest. The entire town of Silverpine Valley seemed to have answered her and Ethan's call faster than anyone could have imagined. From every narrow road leading in, families arrived: farmers, carpenters, blacksmiths, seamstresses, bakers, honey sellers, and sun-kissed children carrying baskets of fresh eggs still feathered from the co-op, all streaming toward Harper Homestead. They brought not just their goods, but their smiles, and a belief long buried beneath doubt and division. Rough wooden tables were hastily but sturdily set up, the vibrant colors of fruits and vegetables, the golden loaves of bread, and the rich aroma of apple pies mingled with the scent of freshly roasted coffee, filling the space with life. Lucas bustled about, helping to arrange baked goods on trays, adjusting the flowers he had gathered, his bright face beaming like a little sun at the heart of the fair. Scout dashed around after the children, his floppy ears bouncing and tail wagging as if he too wanted to welcome everyone. Ethan stood next to Isabella, his gaze never straying from the growing crowd, his heart swelling with pride and deep emotion. He whispered, "You've done what no one else could. You've reminded everyone that Harper Homestead is the heart of Silverpine." Isabella turned to him, her dark brown eyes glinting with a light that had long lain dormant. "Not me, us." Walter Greaves had arrived too, his sun-weathered hands and weathered face standing tall as an elder statesman of the land. He cleared his throat, and gradually, the crowd quieted. Amidst the lively atmosphere, he spoke with a voice that carried warmth and strength. "We gather here today," Walter said, "not just to trade goods, but to show all those who covet this land that Harper Homestead is the lifeblood of Silverpine Valley. This place is not just an old farm. It is home. It is part of us." Applause thundered across the field, louder than birdsong at dawn. Some even wiped away tears, because to them, Harper Homestead was not just land. It was memory, history, and proof of life's endurance in this harsh land. Isabella stood still, her throat tight as she watched her community gather. Her parents' old friends, those who had once stood beside her family in brighter days, were now returning, bringing their most sincere support. She felt a warm hand squeeze hers gently. It was Ethan. His eyes said everything without words. "I won't let you fight this alone." Lucas tugged at Isabella's sleeve, pointing toward the green sprouts in the far garden that she, Ethan, and Lucas had planted together. "Look, Miss Isabella, they're growing already." Isabella smiled, for the first time since the storms of her life had begun. A full, radiant smile as bright as the morning sun. "Yes, Lucas," she replied, her voice trembling with deep emotion. "And so is Harper Homestead." The lively buzz of the market continued, echoing far across the valley. Harper Homestead, once on the brink of collapse, now pulsed with the vibrant heart of all Silverpine Valley. And above all, something more important had sprouted: life, human connection, and the unyielding hope of a future that would never bow to any force. The first farmers' market at Harper Homestead exceeded all expectations. As the sun tilted westward, its golden rays bathing the ripened barley fields and shining over baskets of plump vegetables, jars of amber-hued honey, and the radiant smiles of Silverpine's people, an unspoken understanding filled every heart. They were doing something far greater than mere trade. They were protecting the heritage of their land, weaving together the bonds of community that time and fear had once unraveled. Isabella Harper felt this truth more deeply than anyone. Standing amid the crowd, she was no longer the solitary woman bearing her burdens alone. She was the steady flame now burning brightly, the center of this great revival. Ethan Morgan stood beside her, never once leaving her side. His quiet gaze took in the thriving scene, as if etching every moment into his heart. Lucas, his son, darted joyfully between stalls, his laughter ringing out like bells across the field. Scout followed closely, tail wagging, as if cheering alongside them all. But just as the festival reached its peak, just as hopes soared highest, a familiar dark shadow swept over the gathering. The sleek black car, chillingly out of place amid the vibrant countryside, turned onto the path to Harper Homestead. No one needed to ask who it was. Victor Langston. The hum of his engine silenced the chatter like a blade slicing through song. The people of Silverpine turned to look, eyes shifting from surprise to wary defiance. Victor Langston stepped out of the car, radiating arrogance, his impeccably tailored black suit, deep red tie like a slash of blood, and polished shoes treading Silverpine's soil with disdain. His gaze swept over the simple stalls, the fresh produce, the hard-working townsfolk, and finally locked onto Isabella and Ethan. His smile was the kind that chilled the air. "I must admit," Victor said, his voice slick as oil but sharp as a knife. "You've surprised me. This market, it's lively." Isabella stepped forward, her shoulders squared, her chin held high, her eyes calm but sharp as steel. "It's not just a market, Victor," she replied. "It's the heart of Silverpine." Victor smirked, his eyes glinting with mockery. "The heart?" he repeated, tasting the words like bitter wine. "I doubt a few baskets of potatoes and jars of jam will stop the wheels of progress." Isabella. Ethan could no longer hold back. He stepped forward, standing firm beside Isabella like a living fortress. "You understand nothing about this land," Ethan said, his voice ironclad. "Silverpine is not a place you can swallow with your schemes and smooth threats." Victor glanced at him, his lip curling in contempt. "You're just a carpenter, Mr. Morgan," he sneered. "What do you know about this game?" Ethan met his gaze unflinching. "I know there are things you can never buy with money." Murmurs rose from the crowd, their eyes no longer uncertain but blazing with newfound resolve. No reminder was needed. This was their defining moment. A battle fought not with weapons but with unyielding hearts. Walter Greaves stepped forward, his voice strong as bedrock. "Mr. Langston, understand this well. Silverpine Valley does not kneel to those who wield only laws and threats." Victor's gaze darkened, his face tightening. "We'll see," he growled. "The council won't be swayed by country fairs." He turned to leave, but before getting into his car, Victor cast one last look at Isabella, his voice dripping with menace. "I'll be back, and when I return, all your hopes will crumble to dust." His car sped off, leaving a trail of dust behind like a scar across the earth. For a heartbeat, silence hung in the air. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a woman raised her basket high and shouted, "For Harper Homestead." Her cry spread like wildfire. "For Harper Homestead." Voices rose together, growing louder and stronger, swelling like a tide of defiance and unity. Isabella's throat tightened, her chest swelling with overwhelming emotion. She gripped Ethan's hand tightly, their eyes meeting in perfect understanding. The battle lines were clear. Victor Langston might have wealth and influence, but Harper Homestead had hearts, had community, and had a love that could not be bought or broken. This battle, they would not fight it alone. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The next morning dawned bright and clear over Silverpine Valley, the sky painted with golden streaks like woven silk ribbons stretching across Harper Homestead. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass after last night's rain, brushing against Isabella's face as she opened the sturdy, weathered wooden door of her home. The weight of Victor Langston's threats still echoed in her mind like a dark, foreboding bell. She had lain awake for much of the night, his chilling words replaying again and again. But as she stepped out onto the porch, the morning light ignited something deep inside her, a small yet unyielding flame. Ethan had already risen earlier than her. She spotted him at the western fence, checking the spot where yesterday's strong winds had dislodged a few wooden beams. His rough, weathered hands tightened the bolts with calm precision, as though he were anchoring the very breath of Harper Homestead to the earth itself. Lucas, in contrast, was a bundle of energy, running along the narrow path to the newly planted garden at the edge of the farm. And it was there that a small miracle had begun to unfold. Amid the dark brown earth, once dry and lifeless, fresh green shoots had pushed their way skyward. Tender and vibrant, they stood tall beneath the morning sun, defying storms and shadows alike. Lucas let out an excited shout, his voice ringing through the air like a bell of hope. "Dad, Miss Isabella, the sprouts are growing." That innocent cry seemed to shatter any lingering gloom. Isabella rushed to the garden, with Ethan quickly abandoning his tools to follow his son. Together, the three of them stood over the neat rows of soil, watching as fragile leaves stretched toward the sky. Scout barked cheerfully, wagging his tail as if celebrating alongside them. Isabella knelt down, her fingertips brushing lightly over a tender green leaf as though touching something sacred. "They're alive," she whispered, her eyes misty with unshed tears. "They're alive." Ethan stood beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder, his voice low and deeply moved. "Just like Harper Homestead," he said, "no matter how fierce the storms, this place survives. It grows stronger." Lucas looked up at the two adults with bright, sparkling eyes. "See? I told you, if you believe in them and take care of them, they'll grow." His simple, pure words were like fresh morning dew soaking into the parched soil of their hearts. Isabella chuckled softly, tears mingling with her smile as she embraced Lucas tightly. "You are this farm's greatest hope, Lucas," she whispered to the boy. His innocent laughter rang out like silver bells, carrying across Harper Homestead and sweeping away the last remnants of fear from yesterday. And the community of Silverpine was not far behind in witnessing this small miracle. That afternoon, the townspeople gathered at Harper Homestead once again, in even greater numbers than before. This time, they didn't just bring produce to sell. They brought tools, seeds, and above all, willing hands and open hearts to transform Harper Homestead into living proof of resilience. Walter Greaves led the way, carrying a heavy sack of seeds. His voice carried over the crowd, filled with determination. "We will make this land not just survive, but thrive stronger than ever." Isabella looked around, her heart pounding with emotion. She saw it in their eyes, not skepticism, but fierce unity. Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently, his gaze meeting hers with unwavering conviction. "We're not just planting crops, Isabella, we're planting hope." "Yes," she replied, her voice stronger than ever. "And Victor Langston will be forced to witness it with his own eyes." All day long, Harper Homestead buzzed with activity. Some tilled the soil, others planted seeds, and others still repaired storm damage. Children picked weeds, while the adults worked side by side, their faces beaming with purpose and love for the land. Scout, the energetic little farm dog, dashed around like a spirited foreman, barking when anyone needed a helping paw, even dragging small branches to aid in the work. Lucas ran tirelessly back and forth, gently placing each seed into the soil with whispered words of encouragement. "Grow big and strong, we're counting on you." As the day wore on and the sun began to dip toward the horizon, its golden light drenched the faces of every person at Harper Homestead, making each drop of sweat glisten like jewels. And when the work was done, Harper Homestead was no longer land waiting for a miracle. They had created the miracle themselves. Rows of fresh young plants lined the fields. Laughter and conversation filled the air. Hope sparkled in every glance and every touch of the earth. Harper Homestead had become a heartbeat too powerful to silence. The following morning, a thick veil of fog clung to Silverpine Valley, as if the last shadows of doubt were clinging to the land before the dawn's cleansing light could banish them. But at Harper Homestead, the air buzzed with anticipation. The farmers' market had stretched into a second day, but it was now far more than a simple event. It had become a living testament to their unity, a message to the county council. Harper Homestead was the lifeblood of Silverpine Valley, not a forgotten corner of the map to be erased by greedy hands. Walter Greaves stood like an old oak tree at the heart of the gathering, watching the people of Silverpine breathe life back into their land. He had spent his life rooted in this soil, and today, he saw it rise anew. Ethan Morgan, his sleeves rolled high, his calloused hands never resting, moved from stall to stall, offering words of encouragement and quiet strength to all. Isabella Harper, the brave heart of Harper Homestead, stood tall at the center of it all. The wind played with her hair, and the sunlight kissed her features, illuminating the resilience that now defined her spirit. And Lucas, the little son of their farm, scampered between rows of young plants, his laughter like a melody carried on the wind. But then, the sound of an engine once more pierced the lively atmosphere. Victor Langston's black car, a dark specter, rolled back onto Harper Homestead. This time, He was not alone. Behind him followed the vehicles of the county council. Officials in tidy suits with faces stern and watchful, their eyes sharp as hawks. Victor stepped from his car with a victorious smirk. "Today," he declared loudly, his voice brimming with triumph, "we end this little charade." Isabella advanced to meet him, her eyes blazing not with fear, but with unyielding defiance. "No, Victor," she replied firmly, her voice like a ringing bell across the farm. "Today, we show Silverpine Valley, and you, that Harper Homestead cannot be erased." The council members stepped down from their vehicles, their eyes scanning the bustling market, the overflowing stalls of fresh produce, and the children running happily among the fields. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady as a mountain. "Take a good look around you. Harper Homestead isn't abandoned, it's the heart of this community. It lives and breathes every day." Then, in a moment of pure, innocent timing, Lucas came forward, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers freshly picked from their revived garden. "I grew these here," he said, his clear young voice carrying over the crowd, looking straight at the council, "because we want this to always be our home." A hush fell over the gathering. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions softening as they took in the sight of this child standing in defense of his family and land. Walter Greaves stepped up beside Lucas, his deep voice resonating. "We're not just defending soil and timber. We're defending our history, our families, our dreams. Langston can buy lawyers and paperwork, but he'll never buy the love we have for Harper Homestead." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Victor Langston's jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he saw control slipping from his grasp. Finally, the head of the county council, a man with silver hair and eyes filled with wisdom, stepped forward and spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Victor Langston, given what we have witnessed here today, your petition to seize Harper Homestead is hereby denied." Cheers exploded across Harper Homestead like fireworks. Applause and joyous cries filled the air as the people of Silverpine Valley embraced each other, their faces alight with tears and laughter. Isabella turned to Ethan, her eyes brimming with tears of relief and happiness. Without hesitation, Ethan clasped her hand tightly in his, their gazes locking in shared victory. Lucas jumped with glee, shouting at the top of his lungs, "We did it, we kept our home." Isabella knelt, wrapping Lucas in a tight embrace. "Yes, Lucas, this is our home, forever." Victor Langston stood frozen, pale with fury but utterly powerless. He now understood that no matter how much wealth or influence he possessed, he could never break the wall of love and unity that protected Harper Homestead. As Victor's car disappeared beyond the horizon, the setting sun bathed Harper Homestead in a fiery glow. Light glinted off the rows of young plants, the market stalls bursting with bounty, and the faces of a family reborn. And in their hearts, one truth rang louder than any storm. No one can take our home from us, not while our hearts still beat, and our hands remain joined together. Harper Homestead had not only survived, it had been reborn. And from that day on, Harper Homestead was no longer just a farm. It became a living story of perseverance, of community, and of all that is beautiful when people choose to stand together for what they love most.